There's two aspects to what we're talking about. There's the timeless part, which is the teaching of Kriya Yoga, which is the teaching of changing your consciousness. And the other part is turbulent times. And so we're playing both of them out. One of them has nothing to do with anything that's going on the planet right now. And the other part of it is, what is going on the planet right now? And what can we expect? Because we live on many levels at the same time. Even though Jyotish was willing to put up with what he was putting up with, he had to find a temporary solution. And that's where we are right now, which is we're just living in an age that's very, very hard to calculate. In the last 3 days or 4 days, we've been here a week. We've been to several of the ancient sites that are possible to see. And just, our country is America, USA, 250 years old, which is, that's how long it takes to construct some of these cathedrals and castles. So, but we don't have anything. Everything that was on the landmass that was now the USA was essentially annihilated by the coming of the Europeans to that place, which has not been great karma for the USA. And Yogananda had quite a few things to say about that, but that's where I'm going with all of this. There's an ancient teaching in India that has also been part of almost every traditional society, which is that there are different levels of awareness that sort of cycle through. They, in some societies, have called it, the Iron Age, the Bronze Age, the Silver Age, the Golden Age. They'll talk about the era of man, of heroes, of demigods and gods. And they, when they have any continuous history, see where they can go back far enough. We don't, in your world and on this land mass, you have evidence of these places, but you don't necessarily have a clear idea of what they were saying. We have evidence of Egypt being an extraordinary and unusual society, but we don't know how to measure what they were doing or how they were doing it. There's only one culture on the planet now that has been continuous for as far back as anyone knows, and that's the culture of India, it's just a very interesting fact. So they are the source of a lot of understandings that no other culture has been able to find on their own. This is why traditionally India has been called the guru of the planet, because they've maintained this continuous line of understanding. Even the concept of yoga, they find carvings and other ancient artifacts that are thousands of years old, that have people meditating in the same way that they meditate now, that has symbols that people perceive, like the spiritual eye, which you actually see when you meditate, have people doing physical yoga postures, and they can date these things as 5,000 years old, and they don't know how old they are when they were done. It wasn't like new development yoga postures, so which is how we take it, especially in the USA, where new is better. The newer it is, the more it's reliable. Peculiar twist, but that's nonetheless how our country has worked. But one of the traditions of India, of these 4 ages, is very well grounded and continuous. And it talks about the fact that, now this is very important. This is not a system of human development. This is not a description of how humanity rises and falls. Because the first premise that we have to understand of ancient wisdom is that the entire actual drama is not this incredible show that we're involved in. The actual drama is the development of our own awareness and the awakening of our own consciousness. Even in the tiny little microcosm of one incarnation, even if we don't remember or don't believe in any others, if you think about it, everything that is considered to be progress for an individual is that we gradually increase our awareness of possibilities and realities that are right there in front of us. We don't invent them, we don't manufacture them, we just come to know what they are. How many times in your life, when you've made a significant positive change forward, is it because not that you acquired anything, but you realized something. I've come to realize what the effect of that experience was on me. I've come to realize the character of this person, either for better or for worse, that I didn't realize before. And that vocabulary means it was always there, I just wasn't able to perceive it. And this should be a clue to us. It isn't a clue as much as it should be. If we can go along not being aware of things that are critically important for us to know, and then for one reason or another, usually because of hard experience, unfortunately, I think it's a lousy system, but that's how it's set up. And recently, God has not asked me for my opinion. I keep it in reserve, just in case they ever kind of get in trouble and come and ask me, and I will tell them what I think. But that's what often happens, isn't it? That some way or another, our condition becomes torturous, or at least uncomfortable. And if it becomes uncomfortable, we start looking for solutions. My mother, who died 20 years ago, very sweet woman, very loving mother. I have naturally curly hair. And my mother had very straight hair, and my mother really loved my naturally curly hair. I was just remembering, my mother would often say to me, "Come here, honey, and let me squinch your hair so it'll be curly." Those are the kind of memories I have of her. She was a very sweet woman. But she didn't have a lot of willpower. She didn't have a lot of discipline. And when she was emotional about something, her opinion wasn't entirely trustworthy. Let's just put it like that. She was still lovely. 56 years with my father, and they were very happy. But, oh dear, my father began to lose his mind a little bit in the last couple of years. And at some point, my father said to me, and he would never have said it if he'd been in his right mind, "I love the way you stand up to her. I was never able to do that." But she got Parkinson's, and for more than a decade. Parkinson's is a rough number. Yeah, she had it like for 15 years, which was a long time. But toward the end of that, she said to me, we were out having lunch somewhere, she said, "I hate to admit it, but this disease has been the making of me." Because it just motivated her strongly enough to develop qualities in herself that had been lacking, and as a consequence inhibited her ability to move through the world, as her talents would have predicted, just like that. So how many times in our life experience are we just not quite doing it, but when we begin to suffer, all of a sudden we go forward. So I can complain to God. Actually, Yogananda himself complained to Divine Mother, which is how he always thought about God, as our loving mother. But he didn't agree with the way Divine Mother made us suffer. But he was being lighthearted when he would say that, because it changes us. That's just the way it works. And one of the interesting things to consider in terms of timeless wisdom, which is to say something that never goes out of style and wasn't invented yesterday, but is just that which is. One of the Sanskrit words for the nature of life, Sanatana Dharma, which is often translated as eternal religion, but I think that's misleading. Another way of translating that is that which is. I mean, that's what happens when you realize something, isn't it? It's just that which is. We're just coming into a greater appreciation of reality itself. So we change because when we begin to suffer, a part of us absolutely knows that there's something wrong. We don't suffer and say, well, this is just the way it is. I mean, we do become more realistic about our naivete in life, that's a fact. But we know it's wrong for us to feel unhappy, that we were born for happiness. And everything about our lives is geared toward maximizing that happiness. Every decision that we make is because we think it's going to lessen our suffering and increase our happiness. I mean, I can talk freely and lavishly about God and about reincarnation and karma and the chakras all kinds of, relatively speaking, esoteric or maybe controversial, or maybe you agree, you don't agree. But all of it is built on that very simple premise, which is that we know we were made for happiness and we're always working hard to get it. And when suffering gets bad enough, then we finally put out the energy. Just like my mother said, I hate to admit it, but it's been the making of me. Because nothing prior to that motivated her to overcome whatever it was that was keeping her from really grabbing hold of life the way she should have. Okay, so what we're working with is we're trying to really come into attunement, which is another way of saying it, with that which is, so that our efforts and our decisions will actually be in cooperation with the flow of life itself. And every religion, I mean, we're in a Methodist congregation sanctuary right now, very happily inside a place where people have been seeking eternal truth for as long. I mean, it was built for us to understand eternal realities. Every religion, it's an effort to do that. But every true religion, meaning based on Sanatana Dharma, that is really based on that which is and not just somebody's opinion. Nowadays, with social media, a person can just declare themselves in all sorts of ways, and if your camera is good enough, you can sort of be your own source. And going through all the different choices, you can see that some people have a firmer grip, a bigger perspective. But anything goes. Even just the whole concept of even ancient, like Christianity, religions, or Hinduism, which has, been there forever. Judaism, all of them, they're falling out of fashion in a peculiar way, because we're moving in. This is what I was talking about, the ancient. Different dimensions. That's where I was going. Let me pull that back for a moment. The concept of the Indian concept of these four ages is not a phenomenon of humanity. The belief nowadays that humanity itself is evolving is unfortunately not true. Because it's the fact that every individual has the opportunity to expand their awareness and to grow into a greater state of awareness is eternal. And that's the drama that's going on. And that drama takes place when each of us has a physical body and when we have all come onto a planet. Yogananda made the simple statement without any equivocation that there are countless inhabited planets that we have to choose from. And each of them represents a certain condition. So assuming reincarnation, assuming that when we leave our physical bodies, our consciousness continues. And if you haven't already, just look up near-death experiences. And you find all these people, many, many people from all different places and levels of consciousness and backgrounds, dying, stepping out of their bodies and discovering, here's the good news and here's the bad news. I'm still there, Like I find it stunning that every day I wake up as myself. I try not to contemplate this too much because it could tip me over into mental imbalance. But don't you find it amazing? And don't you find it amazing that when this experience is over, every one of you will walk away and you will still know who you are. You will still be the same person. And your entire story will still be with you. Everyone, every single human being that you see anywhere, they have an entire story and it remains intact. No matter how crowded they get, no matter how tightly they hug someone, there'll always be the moment when you'll step apart and there you'll have your individual story. So that's where the motivation I was talking about is all you ever really have is your consciousness. But between our lifetimes, when we're not born as a clean slate. I know myself have never been pregnant, but women who have borne more than one child tell me, and the fathers too, because they're there, they're close, psychically close. Every child is different from the beginning. Yeah, I see you women in the room who know this, you're nodding your heads. It's not just it's a different gender, it's another person. And it's not a blank slate. It's not just a blob that just comes in and then you imprint to be something. It becomes what it is right from the beginning. Well, the obvious explanation for that is that this is just another chapter. This is just a continuation of this very long story. Swami Kriyananda came to our school, our children's school. We actually now have school from 4.5 years old all the way through up to, not university, but up to university. And Swami Kriyananda came. He was already elderly. He had white hair, looks, essentially like he does in these pictures. And but his consciousness, the same as I saw all those years ago, is very different. And children who are reading energy could tell that he looked like an old man, but there was something goofy about him as an old man. He didn't quite fit. And this little girl, she was about 7. She was a very feisty little kid. And she just kept moving closer and closer to him like this, just more and more interested. And there was no reason to stop her. He was just relating to everyone. So she just moved closer and closer. And finally she got real close. And she just said, "How old are you anyway?" Just like that. And in our school, these are part of what we don't teach it like a dogma, but it's just part of conversation, because it's part of conversation that you've had previous lives. So Swami just folds his arms and looks at her and he said, "Well, I'll put it like this. When you were an old woman, I was a little boy." She kind of looked at him for a minute and then somehow it clicked. Just walked away. She was perfectly satisfied. There was a little boy in one of our community houses, and he was at that stage where he was very clumsy, and nearly every dinner the glass of milk just poured over onto the table. Finally, his father got so impatient with him and lost his patience and spoke sternly to his child. And the little boy said, just very calmly, "When I was the daddy and you were the little boy, I never yelled at you." Now I'm going to finish with another story, because we're telling fun stories about this. A friend of mine, her son, I met her when her son was maybe university age, but when I started talking about, you're in the astral world, which is where I was going, you leave your body, you're in another dimension. It's hard for us to understand, but you're in another dimension. And when you have karma is an unlearned lesson, something you don't know about what's going to bring you happiness and what's going to cause you suffering, and how to respond to what's going on. Think about it like that. Think how many things that happen to you are because you don't understand where your happiness comes from. You don't understand what's going to cause you suffering. You may feel, this has happened, now I must be crushed and unhappy. Or this has happened and I'll be happy all the time. And then we find out it didn't quite work out that way. Or we made certain decisions that, I love this phrase, seemed like a good idea at the time. But in retrospect, did not work out the way that we expected. That's karma. Because if you didn't have any karma, you would see it clearly. Karma is a vibration that interferes with your clear perception of reality. And so because you can't really see that which is, you have to make decisions that are not in alignment with that which is. Then the consequences come onto you. And if you're paying attention and have a little bit of spine and can stand up to it, you get a deeper understanding of why that really wasn't such a good idea. And then if you really learn, because we only learn from experience, people can tell you the same thing over and over again, but only, isn't it so? There'll be a certain point and you'll realize, oh yeah, that's what my dad said to me when I was 7. But it just takes you till what? You're 45, and then all of a sudden it crosses your mind that that's what your dad said when you were 7. Oh my. But you remembered it, but you didn't understand it, and you certainly didn't run your life by it. But then after you have that experience, then you tell your kid, I didn't listen to my father, but you should listen to me. How is that working? You just tell me afterwards, okay? So we have to have the experience. We have to go through it. But one lifetime just isn't enough. We just can't finish it. I mean, we grow a little bit, but think how many incarnations are unresolved when people die. You're still mad at this person, you're still hurt because of that, you still want people to listen to you, all of that. And we're often not conscious of it. The experience of being with Swami Kriyananda was so interesting because he had the whole picture. He could just understand people really in an instant. This is very meaningful to me, and it took me a long time to understand this. There was a group of people sitting around. Often Swami Kriyananda would come to stay in the house where I lived, and friends would come, and we had a whole group around the table. They were talking about some issue having to do with the publishing company, which wasn't really my responsibility. They were debating different ideas around the table, and I suddenly had an inspiration that I thought was quite good, which turned out not to be good, but I thought it was good. And I couldn't break into it because there were some very strong voices. And finally, I was just joking, but I was trying to just get my turn. I said, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me, just like that, meaning it humorously. Swami Kriyananda happened to be sitting next to me, and he said, not a hint of humor, Asha, we always listen to you, just like that. Whoa. So I gave my bad idea, and it was, it didn't go anywhere. But for years afterwards, I realized that was really true. I was often fighting to be heard. For no particular reason. I mean, people did listen to me for the most part. But still, it's just like we have these things in us that we just don't quite know are there until something happens. In this case, he spoke to me in a way that startled me. And I heard it. It took me many more years before I believed it, but I at least heard it. So isn't that what we go through? So when you're in the place between our incarnations, and I always have to say the chakras, understanding the chakras, which are the spiritual energy centers, many people talk about in many different ways. Understanding it the way Swami Kriyananda explained it, which I explain in many classes. I have a YouTube channel. Just type in chakras. If you can understand the chakras, it will help make everything clear to you, because the chakras are the energy pattern that carries over from one incarnation to the next. So when we leave the physical body, we're basically living in our energy body, which is the pattern of the chakras. And there's lots of lessons there that require a physical body to experience for one reason or another. Maybe it's just a passion for apple pie that makes us crazy, or more seriously, a desire for alcohol, or to smoke a pipe, or many, many, many things that require, or to be admired by others for your extraordinary intelligence and perhaps your beauty. Or, listen to me, listen to me, listen to me. It can be any of those things. So when we've rested, when we've gotten a little holiday, toward the end of my parents' life, I asked Swami Kriyananda, I was saying, my mother her body was not good and my father's mind wasn't so great at that point. Sir, I think it's time for them to take a vacation in the astral world. Don't you think that would be good? And I started praying for that. Just really like they've had a good life. They don't have to be here forever. I wasn't offering euthanasia. I was just saying, you don't have to just cling to this world. You can gracefully let go. Just go on an astral vacation. So if you have subtle awareness and are conscious of non-physical realities, then you wake up in the astral world. Because it's a non-physical universe, you can see the beauty in light, you can hear the beauty of music, you can having refined feelings, and you don't miss the grosser experiences of the physical world. However, we still have in our chakras unfulfilled and unresolved desires. We need to be with people in a certain way. What brings us back over and over again are two things. We long for something or we regret something. And you can have positive and negative longings. You may long to not quit the piano so that you'll be able to play beautifully when you grow older. You may long to have married not him, but his brother, who was much nicer than he was. It could be any of those things. To have children, or maybe have a life without any children. You might have been a woman who longs to be a man, or a man who longs to be a woman. Or you might long for revenge. You want the opportunity to make somebody else's life as miserable as they made yours. But in any way, you're restless. You're not at peace because there's a whirlpool of energy that has some desire at the center of it, and it brings you back. Or you regret. Oh, if only. And I'm saying all these things because if you don't want to just keep reincarnating, you might consider, what kind of regrets are you holding on to? What kinds of longings are you holding on to? And do you want to just keep having unlearned lessons and then just keep having to go through these lessons over and over again? All we have is our consciousness. Change your consciousness, you change everything. So when it's time for us to learn those lessons again, we look out over the choices of inhabited planets, and then here we come back to the Indian tradition is this. And in India, they don't understand it anymore because it became confused, because we've just come out of the darkest age. And during that time, the popular understanding of this in India is no longer valid. But Yogananda corrected it and his guru corrected it. This is what it is. It's our planet is involved, Earth is in the solar system, and we are part of a galaxy. And this is even modern science now, that there's a tremendous energy source at the center of the galaxy. And we're sort of, at one place in relation to that energy. Our whole solar system moves in an elliptical orbit, and that orbit takes it closer and farther away from that energy center. This is not astrology, this is astronomy. And this is verified increasingly, not completely, increasingly verified by modern scientific discoveries. And this whole cycle, going close to the center, then far away from it, 24,000 years. And it goes through four stages that are ascending, and we get brighter and brighter, more enlightened on this planet, till we reach the closest point, and then we start moving the orbit away. And then the same ages repeat themselves in reverse order, descending. So everybody wants to know, where are we in the cycle? 500 nadir, 500 years after Christ, was the lowest point of the cycle. And historically, that's when the barbarians went through and basically burned everything. And the Irish saved civilization. There's a very good book about that. You all know that. Because the monasteries preserved deeper truth. But the libraries were burned, everything was lost, and then we started up the other side. The four ages are the age of matter, the age of energy, the age of thought, and the age of spirit. In other words, where does power come from? From matter, from energy, from thought, or from consciousness, from spirit. Okay? The darkest, and each of the ages, the higher the age, the longer it lasts, of this 12,000 year up and down. So Kali Yuga, the age of matter, ended, the descending cycle of it ended at 500 AD, and we started then on the ascending cycle. 1,200 years is on both sides. 1,200 years, which brought us whatever to 1,700. And that's when it began to shift, and when it really changed was the year 1900. Now just think for a minute. The entire world has transformed since 1900. You rode a horse in 1900, and I took a plane from San Francisco to here, from Austin, Texas. But we, in 8 hours we were here. Wasn't even a sailing boat. And when they first made cars, they measured them in terms of how many horses they were equivalent to. It's a 4 horsepower engine, right? It was as strong as 4 horses because nobody had any other way of even imagining it. I wonder how much horsepower there is in the iPad over here. But that's all been since 1900. And what happened simultaneously is that the separation imposed by thinking of the world only as matter has also begun to be dissolved. Because the form of things was the definition of things. That's why I'm a Catholic, I'm a Jew, I'm a Hindu, and then even if you're a Christian, you're a Methodist or you're Episcopalian or whatever it is, the form was the definition of the reality. But then Einstein told us that all forms are just the same. It's just energy assuming different patterns. That has been pretty disruptive, if you stop and think about that for a minute. Now, bear in mind, however, the drama is individual consciousness. Jesus was born at the lowest age, going down. It couldn't have been any worse. But that was the right environment for countless reasons, one of which is there's no need to even try to transform society. It's just collapsing. So if you just want a lifetime in which you go out in the desert and you go into the caves and you just turn your back on society, that's a great age to be born. Because you just walk in and walk out. You don't have to deal with it at all. Now we're in an ascending age where consciousness is expanding, and Yogananda came to bring us into that age. People like myself came to help him. And so I have to hang out with everything. I have to travel and drive cars and meet people and have a job. And gee, the little stone cell looks, nothing personal, but the little stone cell looks really nice sometime. Okay? Now here's another part of this, which is this transition from matter to energy, which is where we are. Kali, which means dark, to Dwapara, which simply means second. Between matter and energy, it's a very, very turbulent transition. Even though the awareness on the planet is enlightening, what is happening on the planet is we are recognizing our shared humanity. Because the form is not rigid anymore. Now we have the flexibility to really experience. Okay? Those who are either get their power or their enjoyment or their commitment from form do not like this ascending age. And that's what the fight is right now. The fight is those who want the form to stay there, my race, my religion, my country, my language, my traditions, my position, my egoic power. And those folks, the word was brought to me earlier today, it's the difference between power and force. They have the force, they have the weapons, they have the military, they have the national budgets, and they're just doing it. Now the reason God is allowing them to do that is the unfortunate and fortunate fact that we're all equally loved by our Divine Mother. And that every one of us has the same potential for awakening, and everybody gets a chance to have the experience that they need. And these souls have they've developed a great many capacities. They're using them in an unfortunate manner, but they have developed a great many, they have access to even to inner power. And they're getting a chance to find out if this is going to make them happy. Right? And so a whole lot of those people, this is a great time. You're in the astral world. You're a powerful, egoic person with political ambitions who would like to have a nuclear code, maybe blow up a lot of the planet. This is a great time. You see, I want to go to planet Earth because I can really act out this story. Then you have people like us who say, you know, I'm really just awakening to the light, and it would give me so much joy to help people, to share what I'm learning, you know, and I would like to be someplace where people care. Oh, well, here's a good idea. Earth is going to get so scary, you know, like really, really scary, that a lot of people are going to be asking the right questions and listening to the answers. So why don't you go down there and help? Or why don't you go down there and learn? And then also, there's another reason why this is a good time for us. It's because it scares me. It's fear. It arouses fear in me to think that hard things are going to happen. But, the Bible says, St. John says, perfect love casts out all fear. What is perfect love? Perfect love is divine love. Knowing that I am loved by God, that there is a divine plan in place, that what happens to us doesn't matter, but only what we become through what happens to us. So how big a challenge am I ready for? I mean, a challenge where we have wars and famines and economic collapses. That's a good challenge. My egoic self says, no, please, no. My soul says, oh boy, this one's going to be really hard. Because that's how we learn, don't we? And this is what we're caught in right now. And this is why many, many people are turning to the light. Because you can't just remain neutral right now. Yogananda's predictions, Mother Mary of Medjugorje, Mother Mary of Fatima, Venezuelan visionary, Padre Pio of Italy. I mean, they're just, everybody who has divine sight is saying, oh, it's going to be a rough journey. But on the other side of it, and they don't give us exact numbers, unfortunately, on the other side of it, there's going to be such an embracing of uplifting energy. So this is where we are. So we all are right now we're pretty much living as we have always lived. You know, we have enough food to eat. Our houses are still intact in this part of the world. But you know, relationships are really hard to hold together. Children, young people are not optimistic, and so there's a lot of strangeness going on. There's a lot of drug addiction. There's a lot of drinking. A lot of things that aren't helpful because everybody feels it. So are we going to, at the end of this lifetime, be able to say, well, I learned a lot? Are we going to be able to say, well, I just hid under my bed and I never really got anywhere? I mean, so it's not a time when we can be neutral. Not at all. But the good news is, isn't that good news? I wanted to tell you about my friend I never finished. When I talked about being in the astral world and you're looking around and you're seeing what the choices are, and your guardian angels are there, and it's not like you're just all on your own. Your guardian angels are helping you, and you have a lot of intuition. And Yogananda said that when the sperm and ovum unite, that represents, a potential. And there's a flash, this is just his words, there's a flash of light in the astral world that has a certain vibration, and the souls that are in tune with it will move toward that light. And he said sometimes more than one makes it into the womb. But I don't have, after that I get a little confused. I think of like a big sale at a department store, and everybody's lined up at the door, and the door is open, and everybody rushes in to get the bargains. But I don't think it's as disorderly as that. I think it's sweeter than that. But my friend, when her son was 5, and she told him, he misbehaved, and she told him to go to his room. And like little children do, he didn't immediately see the wisdom of what his mother was doing, which is very similar to us and our Divine Mother. So he didn't see the wisdom, so he said to his mother, I hate you, you're a terrible mommy, like that. And then he walked away to his room, but he felt he hadn't said enough. So he turned around and he came back and he said to her, you weren't even my first choice. At that time, my friend had never heard any of the things I've just told you, but she became curious. Honey, who was your first choice? I mean, and they answered her, a lady in the Philippines, but she was taken. Then my friend tells me that her son, who was a very bright man and capable, she said he had this quality, like he would move towards something and then he would often hesitate and reconsider. And she can just see him, seeing that flash of light in the astral world, heading for it, but then stopping for a second and somebody else got the womb. Okay? Whether true or not, it's absolutely delightful, isn't it? But I think there's also a lot of truth in it. So here's the hard part. You see, there's 2 dimensions, well, there's more than 2, but 2 primary dimensions to our sense of self. And nobody in this room actually believes that I am the clothes I'm wearing, right? This is what I have. And when my habit, when I'm giving a lot of evening programs, is after it's all over, after I get back to wherever I'm staying, I immediately change out of whatever costume I'm wearing and I put on my pajamas and like that. And then I can tell by my costume that my public life is over. I mean, I probably know anyway, but when I get into my jammies, I really know it. But I'm still me. I've just changed my jammies and now I have a different costume, so I'm a different character for that time. That's how we wear our bodies. Except we wear them so long and we become so accustomed to them that we think that this is me, which is why a lot of people get very upset if they think they're going to die. They either get upset because they know that time is running out and they have a lot of unfinished business, or they begin to regret things that they may have done. But on the other side, we're just taking off our costume, and then we're going to look down and realize that my role has changed. I'm no longer this one anymore, but everything that is actually me moves on. But what the word ego is often used in spiritual contexts and others, of course. Ego is not really an enemy, it's just a fact. Ego is when I, who am really divine and infinite in my nature, identify with limitation. The eternal thinks of itself as temporary. Like that. It's a fact. I'm responsible for this body. I'm Asha, and I have her whole story, and I have to run her whole story. I have siblings. I had parents. They're gone now. I have other responsibilities I have to take care of. It's not appropriate for me to not take care of the part of me that is this. Swami Kriyananda used to say, I never define myself as Kriyananda, but Kriyananda is an event for which I am responsible. And I want to do it. When one of my friends, very impersonal but lovely, when he got married, and has been married now for probably close to 50 years, very fine marriage, he said to his wife, now I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but I think of marriage as a job, and I intend to do a good job, but that's what I think it is, because it's the event for which he was responsible, but he wasn't going to define himself by it. Okay, that ego has a limited self-definition. And then there is, the Sanskrit word is jiva. Jiva is approximately soul, but it's more like the continuing superconscious aspect of ourself, which knows itself to be infinite. And so that part of us is always there, equally accessible to us, but most of the time we're so preoccupied with the ego identification that we forget that we are also divine. Then we get afraid. We get confused. So, but the jiva knows that this is a great opportunity, and if it gets a little uncomfortable, so what? It's just temporary. Or if we are taken off the planet unexpectedly because one of our brothers and sisters here is learning something else and they blow up our house or whatever it is, we suddenly find ourselves in the astral world again. That's all just fine. This is just the way it has to run. And we chose it. That's the part of it that gets so confusing. Not your ego self. Because the ego self, why would it? Our teenagers, sometimes their parents would say when they said things like, you're a terrible mommy, I don't like you. Not my problem, you chose me. And the teenagers would say, why would I ever have chosen you? And one of the men in our community was sort of like everybody's uncle. He had no children of his own. They would come to him, he says that I chose them, but I would never have chosen them like that. And then my friend was confused because he wouldn't have chosen them either, So, but then Swami put it a little differently. He says, you choose it for its overall opportunity. You don't choose every single detail. You can come into a whole family just because of your sister or your brother, or maybe even your grandmother. But there's something in there, or the culture, or sometimes you choose a family where you don't have much connection because you don't really want to spend your life there. You want to go off and do something else. But in some way, your soul knew, the jiva knew, this is the right place. So every one of us who's here right now, looking at what may happen over the next 10, 15 years, whatever it's going to be, it's because we have karma that will be best fulfilled by going through this experience, by learning what we don't already know about what brings happiness and what brings suffering. And you see, that's a huge range of possibilities. And we all know countless stories because of history of horrible things that have happened, and yet people coming out of those and saying, thank you, God. I would never have become the person that I am if I hadn't gone through that. If you can say that once about anything, what is the limit? What is the limit of our own possibility to increase our awareness? And how much do we have to be burned before we will wake up. So now is the time. Now is the time to stop just trying to find a comfortable way to hunker down and get through it. Now is the time to stand up strong, not only for our own sake, but we all have many people that we love. And that the external matter is strong in a negative way right now. But spirit is always stronger, because that's the origin point of everything. And the more we can and will live in the light, the more we devote ourselves to learning how to live in the light, which is everything that Nalini was saying to you at the beginning: meditation, prayer, attunement, waking up, understanding that which is, the chakras, all of it. The more we know that, the more we, the wind blows and you can stand there. You can stand there strong and you can help others. And in helping others is the best way we grow, because you see, you change your self-identification. The people who are behaving so badly, at least in my country, the USA, it's a spectacular show that's going on right now while we watch 250 years of agreements just be dismantled day by day with apparent disregard for anybody but the ones who are making that decision. A few of them may be acting from idealism, but few of them are. They might code it in idealism. Their self-identity is so small that they're just creating all these suffering for others, and they may create a whole lot more, but it's not going to work for them. They'll find out, because you set up a wave of energy. It has to be, you have to learn it. And so let's get on with the program, both because we can help others, we can help ourselves, and because for this hour were we born. Really. It's, why else would you have been born? And really think about it. And it's much nicer to think that it was on purpose, isn't it? Instead of that it was done to us. Okay. I'm going to ask Dambara to sing a couple of more songs for us, and then we'll take a break, and then I'll take questions, okay? All right, thanks. People have been asking me how we've been enjoying being in the UK, and I don't mean to be rude, but we love it. Because we've been in a lot of places. But your reputation is not accurate. You're extremely warm-hearted, outgoing, welcoming, not at all reserved. And it's just been a joy for us, really, one of our funnest trips. We've been in, we counted it, 50 cities, 23 countries over the last 4 years. What was it, 4 years? Something ever since COVID ended and we were allowed to move. I was a little surprised. I just became curious and asked Dambara, who's the keeper of the record. I never know. I was really shocked, my goodness. And I'll tell you something that I didn't get to say. Before I started traveling, I was very pessimistic about the future of the planet. But there's a huge movement toward the light happening everywhere in the world. It's just that it's not in the news. The news is just, let's make sure we keep talking about terrible things, but the actual fact is people's hearts are responding to an upward movement of energy everywhere. I mean, we've been to Japan, to South Africa, to Estonia, to Latvia. I mean, not just England, Germany, Italy. It's just, the planet is polarizing the population. And so it's like people are being pushed to choose, and they're choosing the light. So the future is very bright. A little bit of turbulence, a lot of turbulence, but I think it's going to be very successful incarnations. Good work for lots of us. Okay, I want to invite questions. Does anyone have a question? Okay, the question, I'm repeating the questions for the camera. In terms of the 4 ages of this planet, where are we now? In the year 500 AD, after the death of Christ, okay, if I had a chart, I'd make it. Think of a circle like this, and it's coming up the planet is getting more and more enlightened. Matter, energy, thought, spirit. And so then it's spirit going up like that. And then the next cycle is also spirit, but they gradually lose awareness. Spirit going down, thought going down, energy going down, then we hit matter again. Then we hit the nadir, and then we start up, but we're still in the materialistic age. So Jesus was born, since that's how we measure time in the West, in the matter age as it was getting worse. They crucified Jesus. They crucified anybody they didn't like. And they didn't crucify them behind closed doors. They crucified them right on the highways. I mean, a level of barbarism that we can hardly conceive of, but it was just natural for the times because it was a very dark age. So at 500 AD, we hit the nadir, and then we started, we were still in the age of matter, but now as time passes, we get more and more enlightened, which is the history that we have. You know, the history that we have is people getting more and more refined. And then each of these ages has a transition period before it begins proper, like the sunrise. You know the sun's about to rise, but you don't see it. In the year 1700, we begin to transition into the age of energy. In the year 1900, the second age, the energy age, began proper. And that's when people began to understand many things they'd already been looking at. Swami's father was an oil geologist, and in Romania, apparently, oil had been bubbling up from the ground forever, but nobody knew what to do with it. And then people began to perceive it as a source of energy. So he was very much in the forefront of that revolution. But the oil always had that potential, but nobody could perceive it. And then it pops into somebody's head to think about it. And so we began to move, and everything has followed from that. And then we come into, electricity and more subtle ways, solar energy, wind power, all these different things that we can do now. And then when Dwapara is finished, the second age is finished, we'll start using the power of thought. And people will just wake up to the power of thought in the same way that we've woken up to the power of electricity. And then you ask the question, as I mentioned, how much more is there that we don't know? Every time you learn something that was always there that you weren't aware of, it's very important for your attitude toward life. Instead of thinking, well, I've figured it out, it's like, I didn't know this before, so how much do I not know now? Makes life far more entertaining, interesting. All right? This is a specific question Kriyananda asked Yogananda. Do we always come back to the same planet? And Yogananda said, oh, not at all. Because there are countless choices. So you won't come back to this planet. See, you won't come back to this planet unless it will help you to come back to this planet. But you will come back to this planet at whatever stage of consciousness you have personally achieved, regardless of what the planet is doing. And we choose to come back. It seemed like a good idea at the time. But that's an important thing I make a joke out of it because it's better to make jokes. You could laugh and then you don't weep. But it's a very important thing to say, I came here for a good reason, for a good, beneficial reason for me to become freer and wiser and happier. So if that's not the experience I'm having, then you have to ask yourself much more deeply, why did I come here? Why did I come here? And you can't tell from what's going on outside, because what's going outside is temporary. But what it activates in you, what are circumstances activating in me? And it's different for everyone. If you're a very timid person, and you're being run over by people and it's making you unhappy, you need to stand up and start swearing at them. You need to really yell, maybe punch them in the nose. That could be progress for you. Because what you need to balance is timidity and fear and helplessness. Somebody who's really good at yelling at people, at punching them in the nose, needs to begin to think, what do I care what they think? But it's not exactly the same circumstances, What matters is what it activates in you, and which direction is forward depends on where you are. Think of it as a circle. Everybody's trying to get to the center, which is our own point of origin. But you can be on opposite sides of the circle. And to get to the center, one may have to go due west. The other person has to go due east. So that's why dogma doesn't work, because it just depends on who you are and how you're off balance, what's required of you. And you cannot, we're in an ascending age, and people think, well, I'll just cling to the edge of planet Earth and it will all get brighter and brighter, and so will I. No, that won't happen. First of all, the cycle's too long for the length of one body, but that's just not how it works. And if you're too good for this planet, you're adorning some other. And if you're too rotten for this planet, then you go to a place that's as rotten as you are. But right now it's a very heterogeneous vibration. Very, very shadow people and light people. We're all here together because it's the way we need it. See, there's certain a priori assumptions that have to be here, such as that we are part of a greater reality, that there is a loving God, that our own higher consciousness is working in cooperation with the Spirit, and that if I tune in deeply enough, I will understand what my next step is. But all of that requires, it's not just something, oh, that's a good idea. It's more like we have to decide that's what we're really going to do. I've been at this a long time, and there's a lot of good days and bad days. But something underneath that just says, well, what else would I do? This is the magnificent exchange in the Bible between Jesus and his disciple Peter. Toward the end of the life of Jesus, he knew he was going to be crucified because he knew everything. And he knew that his disciples were going to be persecuted. And it was really time he needed to leave a very strong core. There couldn't be much waffling among the core. So he started making it hard for them. In the Bible, he says, eat my body and drink my blood. And then, I love this part of the Bible, the disciples said one to another, this is a hard teaching. Because I lived with Swami Kriyananda very closely for decades. And so I have an understanding how he wasn't a Christ, Swami wasn't at that level, but he was very, very advanced. And I understand how human these stories are, because I lived with a very advanced soul and I saw the interplay around him. So, I can see the disciples saying one to another, this is a very hard teaching. And then it says, from this point, many walked no more with him. Because it was just too much. This has been fun, but now he's lost his mind. What are we going to do? Really, you can see that, because he pushes you to a higher level of understanding. In fact, very interestingly, what was being tested was not the divinity of Christ. It was the capacity of the disciples to trust their own intuition and experience. Did they really have an inner understanding of who Jesus was to them? Or did they just have a superficial one, and once he stepped outside of the way their minds worked, then he wasn't what, they just gave up. Many walked no more with him because it didn't make any sense. So he turns to Peter and he says, will you also leave me? And the Bible being so succinct, there's no context there. Did all of Peter's friends just leave? Did Peter have a wife or a mother or a son? Did one of them leave? Why would that question be asked? And what Peter says back is not, oh, I have it all figured out. You're really talking about the bread and the wine and he didn't give a big philosophical explanation, because I don't think he knew either what Jesus was talking about. All that explanation came later. Peter said, where would I go? And that's a really magnificent statement. That's what we're looking for. It's not a question of whether I like it or not. It's this is the way I'm made. This is what is. I'm on a journey, from darkness to light. I'm on a journey from ignorance to bliss. And what else would I do? I find reincarnation is both a threat and also for me, a comfort. Because if I don't get it right now, I'll get it right next time. But it also says to me, if you can follow this, whatever karma I'm trying to work out now is because I didn't work hard enough to work it out then. And so I put it off to the future. But then the future has this awful way of becoming now. And so now I think I'm not going to deal with this. I'm just going to, put my head under a bucket and just pretend it's not there. And then I'll deal with it in the future. But I have this strange feeling that the future is going to feel like now. So it's like, what choice do I have? And it's a tremendous incentive, because I'll either do it now, or I'll do it then, now. And it won't be any more fun then than it is now. Do you follow all that? So Peter says, where would I go? Where could I go where it wouldn't be, where you would not be, well, the word is actually guru, that you would not be my guru, I would not be your disciple, and that I would have to understand. So I don't understand, but where would I go? That's what we're looking for. That's really what we're looking for. Yeah, the question is to talk more about the ego, referencing the Course in Miracles. I understand that, but meaning that the Course in Miracles says it.
I struggle with the fact that it's sometimes said as
and
then sometimes not quite so.
Well, that actually, okay, the point is it destructive? Is it instructive? Is it helpful?
Okay.
The fact of the matter is, first of all, it's a fact. You have to have an aspect of yourself that identifies itself with the physical body it's in and the entire context that comes with it. Almost everything that is a limitation to you, if you think about it, starts with your body. Because your body tells you that I am separate from everyone else, that I am, if I'm born in the UK, I'm not born in the US. If I have dark skin, I don't have light skin. If I have blue eyes, I don't have green eyes. All these alternates. I have, this is my mother, this is my father, these are my siblings, that's not my sibling, that's not my mother, that's not my father. But if you think of all of it, it all starts because we have a physical body. Okay, so, but it's necessary. Even Yogananda said, because he has no karma, completely free, God realized a Christ. Jesus was Jesus the Christ, and the word Christ and Krishna are very closely related. Krishna, Buddha, all of them, they had transcended all their karma. They were just like us. They were just as trapped and stupid as we were at one point, and they simply put out the energy to become free. But when he's called back by compassion, Yogananda said, and he sees the personality he has to assume, because he's going to be born in India, he's going to have these certain parents, he says, at first it's uncomfortable, like a heavy overcoat on a hot day. He says, it's kind of itchy. He said, but then you get used to it. I mean, what are we talking about? I don't know, but the quotes are magnificent, aren't they? But he still had to know which body was his. He still had to talk through it and run around and feed it and, take care of it. So there had to be enough ego to identify with it. And so in that sense, it's a friend, because it tells you what you're supposed to be doing and how you're supposed to be working through it. And the relationship that your body creates to the world also becomes instructive. You learn from that family, you learn from that culture, all those things. However, if the ego becomes your entire self-definition, then it becomes a straitjacket, because you are much more than what this little body has created for you. So when you recognize that it's just the vehicle from which I expand, then it becomes an integrated whole. There's really no difference. I am not my arm, but I have an arm. If I really decided that my whole self was my arm, I would be completely distorted and confused. But if I pretended I didn't have an arm, I would also be like, how do I open the door? I mean, how do I work? But I have to work with it properly. That's exactly what the ego is. It's neither friend nor foe. It's a fact, but we exaggerate its importance. And we start limiting our self-definition. So another way of thinking about it is, if the ego was the palm of your hand, when you put that palm over your eyes, you can't see anything but the palm of your hand. But if you hold it out like that, it's the same size. But just holding it out like that, it's there and it has to be related to, but I can see the whole world. And it's just the balance. It's a much more relaxed way to think about it. And then our mind begins to rise above it. We see ourselves in others. We see ourselves united with others. We rejoice in others' happiness, not just our own. We spend generously for people other than ourselves. The main way people learn this is by having children. And this is God's plan. That's why He compels us. Okay, the question is to talk about meditation, and the meditation I do. I will refer you to the fact that Ananda UK offers very good meditation courses, and Ananda worldwide. There's lots of ways you can learn. Let me tell you. Okay, I'll give you a broad concept. Let me just think about this for a second. Meditation is a primary way that you can expand your self-definition from your limited ego self. One of the things that constantly reinforces our ego is that we are constantly looking outward and getting all our experiences through our physical senses. And then we also begin to think that I am what I get through my senses, and we don't stop and ask the question, well, who is this one who's experiencing it? I don't know if it's popular in the U.S., but a wonderful writer named Michael Singer, who's a disciple of Yogananda. His books are really great, and he's a disciple of Yogananda. And he said, let me think. He said, inside of ourselves, he says there's always two parts. There's the one who's talking all the time, that's inside your own head, but then there's the one who's listening. And he said, we take our thoughts so seriously. He said, but it's the listener that is really the one you want to identify, not the one who's talking all the time. And I believe he said something like, you should take your thoughts about as seriously as you would take the rantings of a drunken roommate. You know? Because but because we're always engaged there, we never stop. We don't know what we would be if we just stopped. In meditation, you shut your eyes, you shut your ears, you don't move your body, and you begin to find out, who would I be if I wasn't who I thought I was all the time? But the problem is, there's very strong magnetic force that keeps us thinking and that keeps us restless. And you sit to meditate and all of a sudden you're hungry. You sit to meditate and you start just making a laundry list of the things you have to do, countless. So the meditation as Yogananda taught it teaches us how to become very in tune with the life force that's always flowing in us. The Kundalini is what some people say, but the words don't matter. Who am I if I'm not doing any of that? Do I cease to exist? And what does it feel like to be other than the ego-identified self? And there's metaphysics, which is as scientific and as exact as the scientific field is looking out and figuring out what's going on there. The metaphysics is looking in and finding out what's going on there, and it's just as objectively true. We are made a certain way, our energy field, and that's the chakras, and primarily that's also the awareness at the point between the eyebrows, the Christ center, the spiritual eye, which is actually the guiding force for all of this. So meditation is gradually shifting our awareness. Yogananda adds to the subject of the chakras that this chakra, the sixth chakra, which is the individual in tune with super consciousness, with higher consciousness, with the divine, with the Guru, with Christ, however you say it. The opposite pole of that is the medulla. And the medulla, Yogananda said, when the sperm and ovum unite, the beginning of the building of the physical body is from the medulla. And it's the one place in the body that can't be operated on. Because if you just touch it, it's where life is seated. Most people live from the medulla. Now this is the same chakra. This is just the limited expression of it and the infinite expression of it. And most of the time our attention is settled back here. That's why the universal expression of humility is to bow your head. Because you release that energy and you bow your head like that. And that's why they say people who are proud look down their noses. It's not really that they're raising their noses, it's that there's so much energy built up here that you end up going like that. I was with Swamiji. We were guests in someone else's church. It was a unity church in I won't mention the city, although the man has long since passed from this world. But Swami starts talking about, people who are very egotistical or very proud like that. In this, he didn't notice, but I was in the audience. This Twitter ran through the whole congregation because their pastor was sitting over there like that. And he really was. He was a very arrogant man like that. And they all sort of saw it and quietly laughed. And then they all went on and Swami just kept going. But what we're learning to do when you meditate the way Yogananda teaches is you really learn to bring your energy from here to here, and then you learn to concentrate your energy so that all the energy in the chakras is moving in harmony with your individuality, in harmony with the spirit. And it all sounds pretty straightforward, but there's a whole big lot of us that has been entertaining ourselves in a different way. But that's the basic of it. And when you really shift your energy to the spiritual eye, it actually gives you mastery over all other aspects, because all of this is just an interplay of energy. Each of the chakras, every time you think, feel, act, worry, anything you do is an expression of life force, of energy. Energy is never lost. It just changes form. We identify with what we do, so it's stored in the chakras according to the level of reality that we are affirming. Not what we can cleverly say, but what we actually really think is real. I mean, I can talk great philosophy about life and death, but I was on one of your horrible narrow roads the other day, and my friend who was driving, who's an excellent driver, he was perfectly fine. I was sure that that giant truck was just about to flatten us like a pancake and it was all over. And I was sort of okay, but a certain part of me definitely did not want to die. Even though, on another level, I don't care if I die. But when that big truck was bearing down on us, I was afraid. Because there's a large part of me that is not finished. Whereas my friend, this man, he's a great friend, he's 6.5 feet tall, big, strong man. It was a complicated situation, but we had bought this property. It was an apartment complex, and it had a lot of fairly low-life people there. And they were moving the low-life people out so that we could upgrade the whole thing. And this one man who was I think he was an active drug dealer, he came into my friend, because they were evicting him. And he came into my friend with presumably loaded, but he came up with, again, pointed it right at his chest and said, I'm so mad at you for what you're doing, I'm going to kill you. My friend went like this, go ahead and shoot, but you'll still be evicted. And because that's how he could respond. I don't think I could have. And so all those energies are fighting against each other, but the more energy you can concentrate here by the right kind of meditation, the more everything that has a lesser velocity than the energy you're building here just automatically gets drawn up. This is why if you really begin a serious meditation what's the word? Habit? Process? What am I trying to say? Habit. Practice. That's the word. Serious meditation practice, you'll just change and you won't even know why. Because you're rearranging the energy in your chakras, which is really who you are. That's why people say, and it's true, don't worry about anything, just meditate. But you have to really meditate. You can't just sit there and put in the allotted time and think about the movie you saw yesterday and the argument you're having with your friends. I mean, you have to actually shift your energy. It's well worth doing. I highly recommend it. You should also understand that getting control of the mind is like being on a horse that has the bit in its teeth. I grew up till I was 15 in Texas, and there was a brief period of time when I rode horses and all of that. And, every so often the horse gets, you at least at that time, I'm not a horsewoman, but this is as much as I know. You pull the bridle and it presses against the tongue of the horse, and he doesn't like that, so he moves. And that's how you get it. But if he figures out that he can clamp his teeth down on that bit, and then no matter what you pull, he doesn't feel anything, then he's in charge. And then he can just ignore you if he wants to. And that you can't get control over him by saying, whoa, horsey. You can't. You have to start changing the dynamic until you get mastery again. So when you first sit down, your brain, your mind has the bit in its teeth. But you have to start somewhere. And once you start, you're cooperating with this divine river of grace. And so the reward for trying is much greater than the experience of trying, if that makes sense. The benefit of meditation is not just how it feels when you meditate. It's that you've put a line in the sand and you say, I'm changing my destiny. Yeah, it's very, very, very important. Yes, my dear. Will they wait for us? Yeah, everybody asked that. Will my grandmother still be there to welcome me, even though she died 15 years ago? Okay. From certain dimensions, let me say this properly. Every form you've ever had in any incarnation still exists as a potential. So the mere fact that your grandmother died and is now reincarnated, maybe reincarnated as your niece or your own grandchild, when you die and you need to see that form in order to understand the love relationship, even if, and this is fascinating, even if that child is living, that same spirit, jiva, that's the word for the individuality, is living in another body on the superconscious self, which is a totally different dimension, it can still appear to you as your grandmother. But when you go into the astral world, after all that is, depending on how aware you are, some people never wake up in the non-physical world because they just don't have the capacity to perceive reality on a non-physical level. I mean, you know people like that. They're just completely body-bound. So they go into a non-physical world, they feel obligated to be unconscious, and they just sort of sleep, and they don't wake up until they have another body. But if there's any refinement on your side and refinement on your grandmother's side, she'll appear. And then you may realize, as you get more comfortable, that you can love her without that form, because using your grandmother, not that you did, but she's only your grandmother because of the bodies you were in. But the love you have between her was not dependent on the form that love took. So once you are transitioned by feeling secure by the form, you realize that it's really the love. Yogananda writes about that in autobiography, and he talks about in the astral world we realize how broad and big our love is, and how it is not at all confined by which one was my son, which one was not my son, whatever those words might be. Because those soul relationships, the ones that are really strong, the form was not the point. We were just playing together in that particular way. So we recognize them. Yeah, and then gradually we realize that what we're recognizing is not the form that it took. And that's how we become freer. And that's how you begin to love everybody. I mean, the Buddha said, supposedly, that the reason we should be kind to everyone we meet, because at one time or another we were close with everyone we meet. I mean, everyone, just walking down the street, which implies a lot of incarnations. Okay, it's a good question. Yes. The question is, my friend here is saying, he's had a very bad run for the last few years. A lot of people he cares about are no longer here. And it feels like he's being punished. He's done something very bad. Okay, in order to resolve that, we have to back up a lot farther. There's no piece of what I'm saying there's very little of what I'm saying that can stand completely alone. Because if you start questioning it, you'll start finding hard parts. Like, okay, so when we say good, the way the ego self defines good means that it suits what we've decided is best, it's generally easy, it's pleasurable. We're being comforted in the ways we want to be comforted, and we call that good. And when we're not comforted in the ways that we want to be comforted, and we don't get what we've decided is best for us, we call that bad. So that depends on what is the purpose of an incarnation. And that also depends on, like, is there a goal to this? Or is this just a random series of events? And the more we can control them and make them match our preferences, the better we've done it. There was an expression for a while, whoever dies with the most toys wins, which is just like a way of defining human life. If I get more than you, then I'm doing better than you. But if the purpose of our human life is to learn lessons that we hardly even know are there yet, until we're forced, for survival's sake, or for just the sake of our own heartbreak, to perceive realities that we didn't know were there. And it's very, very difficult, but in the end we become a finer, better, more compassionate, more expansive human being. Was that a bad or a good experience? And no one can answer that for you. But you're not being punished. It would be just as accurate to say, if I want to be a strong person and I start going to the gym and lifting weights, and I can now lift 10 pounds of weight, I'm just going to spend the rest of my life going to the gym and lifting 10 pounds because I can already do that. But of course, we go to the gym and I don't, I have to be honest, but people go to the gym and they pile on the weights, just pile them on. And my housemate is a high school teacher, and he was a, quote, power lifter, which is probably the simplest sport in the world. You get really heavy objects and you lift them, and then you put them down. And he has gotten all these high school kids really, and a lot of the girls, and as well as the boys, they're all power lifters. They go and they just knock themselves out to lift heavy things, and they think it's fun. But when the weights are emotional, and the weight is disappointment, the weight is betrayal, even though it's exactly the same thing. I could be happy if, but as soon as there's too much weight on me, I'm not happy anymore. It's actually, we're just being asked to go higher and deeper. And we're being compelled to ask the question, is there a God? Does God love me? Am I in control of my consciousness? Is death the final separation? And one of the worst tricks that the shadow plays on you is saying, there must be something wrong with you, that's why this happened. And that's often the hardest thing. But it's not punishment, because you have earned the right to try to lift a weight this heavy. And your Divine Mother would not put that much weight on you unless she knew that you had the potential to lift it. She's a perfect coach. And sometimes you hate your coach, really. But see, that's why we use images like Father and Mother for God. Because how often does a mother do something for her child, or a father do something for his child, and the child is certain it's the worst possible thing that could ever happen, and they feel punished. But in fact, as they grow, and a mother or a father, a parent who gives in to the child's tantrum and just allows the child to stay just where they are, that's not really loving them. I mean, this is taking exactly what's happening. This is not in any way saying that it's bad. It's just saying maybe there's another reason. And maybe this is going to make me capable of helping others, not just helping myself. But I will be able to say, I'll brief it, but there's, Corrie ten Boom was a devoted follower of Jesus who ended up in concentration camps for helping the Jews during the Second World War. And her sister was there with her, and her sister was, before her sister died, because the sister died, she said, Corey, after this is over, you're going to go into the world. You're going to travel the world and tell people about the love of God, the love of Jesus. And you will tell them that no matter how dark the well, the love of Jesus is greater still. And people will believe you because you were here. And she did, because she could really say it. You know, no well is so deep and so dark that the love of God is not deeper still. And that was not words, because she'd been about as far down as you can imagine. And she still discovered underneath it, she could feel that Divine Mother was helping her, not punishing her. So the first thing you have to get rid of is just the thought that you're being punished. You're being challenged. But that means that God has a lot of faith in you. One more and then I'll let this go. Mother Teresa of Calcutta said, God never gives us a challenge greater than we can handle. Sometimes I wish God didn't have so much faith in me. Let me just see whether okay, I'll take one more and then we'll be done. And is there one more? Yes. Yogananda said, of course, there are countless inhabited planets and there are many civilizations far more advanced than this one. So the ludicrous idea that we're the only ones and the smartest ones is just that, ludicrous. So it's just as likely to be extraterrestrials. Do I know? I have no idea. Is it possible? Absolutely. You know, crop circles are a big scene here, and one of the possibilities that it's being projected by a higher civilization trying to communicate with us. Swami Kriyananda became very interested in them at one point. Of all the possibilities, he thought that the most likely. Swami Kriyananda had a dream. This is just about extraterrestrials, because I really don't know what you're talking about, so I'm just riffing here at this point. I think we won't know until they land and talk to us, will we? But the possibility of it being any of those things. But you see, there is no solution like that. It could be all extraterrestrials. They could invade this planet and take us over and put us all in prison. The drama is still how you respond to the opportunities that are given to you and whether or not you use them to resolve your karma or whether you don't. So we're fascinated by whether it's this or that. But in the end, it really makes no difference. It just depends on how we respond to what happens. So Swami Kriyananda had a dream in which a delegation of people came from another planet. They needed a spiritual teacher, and they had looked around, and they thought he was a good bet. He told us this dream, and he wouldn't have told us if he didn't believe it was true. And they were very refined people, and it looked very attractive to him, and this is all he said. He seriously considered doing it. And then he thought, but I'll have to learn another language. He spoke 8. He spoke 8 languages as it was. He said, I'll have to learn another language. I'll have to start over with a whole new culture to figure out who they are. And he just thought he just really couldn't do it. So he had to disappoint them. I didn't think to ask him at the time, would you have died if you said yes? Or would you have worked in both realities at the same time? But I think it's as simple as that. You know, if some other civilization is coming to us, if it's an avatar, if it's a Christ who's bringing the potential of self-transformation, it'll have a very positive effect on us. If we listen, but you know, if we don't listen, it won't do anything for us. If they bring evil, then we'll have to struggle, but we have plenty of evil people here. We don't need them to come from there, you know. Or they'll bring, you know, but see, it's entertaining, and I can be entertained and interested in it, but in the end, the problem is exactly the same. You have a drunken roommate talking in your head, and you have to figure out how to get mastery. I may not have answered your question at all, but from what I understood, that's... Oh, it's a great curiosity. I have immense curiosity. When Swami was alive, I had a great capacity to ask any weird question I had. Sometimes he answered, sometimes he didn't. Sometimes he told me my question was stupid. No, he never said stupid, but he told me it wasn't a good question. But I was confident enough to say, I think it's a good question. Didn't always win me an answer. I think it's worth considering, for the simple reason is, why keep our brains so small? Why not imagine? But nonetheless, the problem is still the same. All right? Question is great sense of the more one comes into the light, the more the contrast with the shadow is intense. Anybody with a sensitive heart is really upset right now. This is usually the second question, not the last one. And it's usually phrased, what about the suffering children? And so you add injustice to it. I was also, injustice really upsets me. I was raised that way. Okay. This is a complicated answer that I'm going to make this big, and I'm just going to try to say it right now. The stages of development go like this. First of all, we don't care about anything. And we solve all problems by just dulling our consciousness. We watch television, we overindulge in sex, we drink alcohol, we take drugs, we overeat, we sleep. We just, I'm suffering, I'll just dull my consciousness. And we all have part of this. How many Netflix have you watched in sequence on one night? Just like we all have times when we solve the problem of suffering by dulling our consciousness. The second level comes to we can become energetic. And I will solve the problem of suffering by making the world conform to what I want it to be. And then we work really hard to make the world conform to what I want it to be. And at a certain point, someone says something like I'm about to say to you, how's that working out for you? Yeah, because you don't have control. The ego has made a decision about what's supposed to happen because I know best. I know what justice is. I know what should happen. Nobody should suffer, which is equivalent to saying nobody should learn anything because when they're learning their lessons, it hurts me. I don't want them to learn anything. That's actually what you're saying. And after we throw ourselves against that brick wall for as many incarnations as you want, you realize, first of all, I'm not helping anyone. Because the actual vibration I'm putting into the world is sadness and anger. So how is that helping? I mean, what is this whole story about? It's selfishness all around us. So then we think, well, what can I control? And we think, oh, I can change my consciousness. Then we rise to the third level. We realize the battle is with my own fear and my own anger and my own exaggerated sense of the possibilities and my belief that I know what's right. And you're not allowed to have any karma. You can't learn anything if you have to suffer, if I have to watch you. There's no such thing as God. Nobody's in charge but me. And how's that working out for you? So it just depends on how long you want to run that tape. Because you will never win. And then you have to decide, what can I do that would really help? And sometimes what you have to do is you have to go stand on the street corner with a sign. You have to join the march. Maybe you have to die for the cause. But if you even want your sacrifice or your protest to be helpful, what kind of energy are you putting into this planet? And if you just become angrier and more incensed by it and more sad and more heartbroken and more incapable of even being nice to the people close to you because you're always thinking about this, am I helping? Which side of the light and shadow am I actually on? So it gets very complicated, which is why often people who are very spiritually minded are not very active politically. I made a decision decades ago. I didn't even used to vote for years in America. Now it's such a chaotic mess, I've started voting. But I'm the most politically active person I know because I have spent most of the last 50 years in one form or another trying to actually solve the problem. And the problem is not them, the problem is us. I mean, we have to be in tune with the spirit. And Divine Mother knows what she's doing. When my parents were at the end of their lives, I kept trying for a while, when they first were in the end, and I had to really help them a lot, I just tried to take over their lives. And I tried to prevent them from learning anything from their own experience. And I realized I was terrified that they would have to learn something by going through some difficulty. And at a certain point I had to think, wow, who am I loving? I realized I was loving me, not them at all. And I also thought, why do I think they can't handle their own destiny? I mean, of course, they couldn't drive and they couldn't do various things like that, but that was all part of, they'd been incarnations to get them to the point where they could have that experience. And then all of a sudden it made me uncomfortable. So I tried to stop it. I mean, that was very personal. And then finally I thought, let me help them work out their karma instead of trying to prevent them from working it out. So if you're seeing people suffering, what will help them work out their karma? Because you don't have the power to change it. You don't have the power to change it, nor would God give it to you, because we're not smart enough to handle it. How can I really help them? By the vibrations I put out into the world, by the kindness, by the love, by the compassion. That's what I really have to offer. And you're here because it frightens you and it angers you. I'm here because it frightens me. It doesn't anger me anymore. That's not true. It doesn't anger me as much. But it still frightens me. And if I'm frightened, and it's everybody's karma, and I'm just walking around being scared, how is that working for you? So you have to decide, what is it that you're really concerned about? And what will really help? Is that a simple question to answer? No. It's even harder to fulfill. But see, and then I'm going to the last part, and unfortunately I'll talk to you afterwards, but I don't want to keep people past the time. Let me finish this thought. Let me think what it is. Yeah, I started to say, it's almost always, I mean, our whole subject is turbulent times. If my subject is something else, the first question is about turbulent times, but we already went through that. The second question is, what about the suffering children? Always. Because the whole concept of karma, reincarnation, God's will, everything hits the brick wall of suffering children, just runs right up against it. But the problem is, if karma is true anywhere, if God's love exists anywhere, it has to exist everywhere. And therefore, I say, I'm just telling you what I've found out to be true. You have to decide whether it's true for you. There's just not a way in the world that thoughts like this can be imposed upon you. So you start with what you can experience, what you can know, and then ask yourself how far you can take it. And you take it as far as you can, and then you just have to stop. And you have to work with what you really know, which is why I'm saying if you want to take it out this way and that way, but think about the energy you're putting into it. But then you ask yourself, what if? And all these things are true. And at a certain point, and I've had a lot of years to work on this, I just know it's true. And even though I have to work within it, I'm not free by any means. Where else could I go? That's why that story of Peter is so powerful to me. I cannot deny the truth that God loves us and that this world is run by a divine loving force and that everything happens is for the good of the one to whom it is happening and that is a potential for them to grow. Does my heart break? You bet it does. But if it's true anywhere, it has to be true everywhere. That's why there aren't 10,000 people in this room. It's a very hard teaching.